Somebody that wants to see you succeed, those are the kinds of things that make people.
Gretchen Rubin, one of the most influential voices on human nature, reveals how we can unlock the happiness we're all searching for.
Happiness is an elusive concept to define. Thinking about relationships is always a great place to start.
But here's the catch. It's not the same for everyone.
Somebody that is connected with you who wants to see you succeed, those are the kinds of things that make people happy.
From dining with Nobel Prize winners to being interviewed by Oprah, Gretchen has spent her career breaking down the complexities of happiness. In this episode, she shares the surprising truths about what really makes us happy and why your path to joy might look completely different from mine. But there's one key lesson that changes everything, and you'll want to hear it. This conversation will challenge your assumptions about what true happiness means.
And negative information will catch our attention faster than positive information. Just understanding.
Welcome to Success Story. I'm your host, Scott Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot podcast network. I am a huge fan of HubSpot because they support entrepreneurs. A lot of entrepreneurs, founders, executives listen to this show. And for entrepreneurs that are trying to build, I have a question for you. Does it feel like your teams are getting pulled in a million different directions when everyone's digging in on different projects with different platforms in different places? It can be tough to stay focused on a common goal, and that throws a wrench into things. That's why HubSpot brings everything your team needs into one easy to use and easy to love customer platform. With it, they have everything they need to scale the business at their fingertips. So your marketers can write blog posts in a snap with AI and build better leads with in-depth campaigns. Sales can build connections and close deals faster with tracking tools and real-time performance insights. Service can get a hand from AI-powered chatbots for better support and more 5-star reviews. And everyone can deliver killer results and grow revenue faster than ever before. Because when your teams work better, your business grows faster. Visit HubSpot.com to get started for free today. Gretchen, I'm very excited to chat with you today. Thank you for coming on. I want to start off just jumping into it. So after years, you studied happiness, you studied habits, you studied human nature. You studied a lot of good, but what are some maybe unsettling or uncomfortable truths that you've discovered about what makes people happy?
Well, I think one thing that's really interesting to think about is how our attention is attracted by anything negative. This is called the negativity bias. And you can see why, from an evolutionary standpoint, why this would make sense. If something's dangerous, we want to pay attention to it. But what this means in ordinary life is that, it's like news casters say, if it bleeds, it leads. And negative information will catch our attention faster than positive information, or negative feedback from our boss will be seared into our memory while we'll forget all the positive feedback that we got. And so one of the things about happiness is it's very helpful to be aware of this negativity bias and to sort of fight against it, because when you think back on, I had this weekend, sometimes the negative things might stand out to you, or, I had this encounter with my coworker. So you have to consciously think about the positive. I think this is why gratitude practices are so popular, because they're a practice to think about the positive instead of focusing on the negative, which is our natural inclination. I have to say, I'm a person who was deeply annoyed by a gratitude journal. This is advice that they often give. And I found that I was very irritated by a gratitude journal. That particular approach did not work for me. But it is certainly something that many people find helpful. And I found other ways to stay focused on gratitude, because it is important, because otherwise we do tend to really concentrate on what's going wrong.
I think that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it kind of seems like half the battle is just understanding our own biological proclivities to negativity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then just more broadly on your point, just understanding ourselves, really having self-knowledge and doing that personal reflection, because I think it's very easy to think like, well, if it's true for me, it's true for everyone. Or if it's true for someone else, it's true for me. And so part of it is our biology, like what is biologically wired into us. And then also, in what way are we different or alike other people? I mean, one way this comes up that's funny to me is, you know how you see that advice, like, if you're going to exercise, you should get up at 7 a.m. and go for a run before work. And I'm like, well, that's good advice if you're a morning person like me. But if you're a night person, and like 30% of people are night people, it's largely genetic and a function of age. If you're a night person, you're not setting yourself up for success because you're at your most productive and energetic later in the day. So it's not that there's anything wrong with that advice. It's just that it might not be the right advice for you. And so we have to get past these sort of boilerplate answers because we're all different from each other.
What was the inflection point in your? It's such an interesting topic to study and to research. It's like, because it's crazy because it affects everyone so much. Yet outside of you, I can probably count on like half a hand of how many people put a lot of effort and energy into studying this phenomenon that impacts our entire life to such a degree where, I mean, it can make or break us. It can cause depression. It can cause suicide. It can it's so impacting. So talk to me about that point in your life where you're like, listen, I got to figure this happiness thing out.
Well, so I can tell you exactly when and where it happened. I'm very subject to epiphany. It's one of my favorite things about myself. And I live in New York City. You might be able to hear a siren going off in the background right now. And it was the pouring rain. I was in a crosstown bus moving very slowly. And so I had one of those rare opportunities for reflection. Because, in the tumult of everyday life, it's hard to step back and take the big look at the big picture. So I was there and I was bored. So I did. I thought, well, what do I want from life anyway? And I thought, well, I want to be happy. And I realized at that moment that here I was saying that happiness was so important to me, but I didn't spend any time thinking about, was I happy? Was it possible to make yourself happier? If you could make yourself happier, what would you do? And I thought, I should have a happiness project. And I was hit by this idea. The next day I ran to the library, got a giant stack of books, contemporary science, ancient philosophy, pop culture, memoirs, novels, biographies, anything I could get my hands on to study happiness. And at first it was just for me. It was just for my own happiness. But the subject was so fascinating and there was so much that I wanted to learn and that I wanted to try in my own life that I thought, well, maybe this could be my next book. And so then I did write a book called The Happiness Project because that's how the idea first struck me. But it's turned out that it's such a vast, fascinating subject that basically I've been studying different subtopics within happiness ever since.
So there's so many subtopics. Okay, so let's first back up a little bit and just maybe define, because you had your own preconceived ideas and notions about what happiness was. I'm sure a lot of those were probably disproved when you started to research. So what is happiness as a concept? Okay,
well, I started my career in law. I was actually clerking for Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor when I decided that I wanted to be a writer. We spent an entire semester arguing about the definition of contract. And if happiness is an even more elusive concept to define. There are something like 17 academic definitions of happiness. And what I've decided is that if you're not a scientist, if you're a lay person, you can have your own definition of happiness. It can be peace, joy, contentment, satisfaction, well-being. Everybody can bring their own definition to it. And we don't have to spend a lot of time arguing about definitions because to me, that just goes round and round. What's peace versus joy? What's contentment versus satisfaction? Whatever you want happiness to be. What I found is that it's really more productive to think about how could you be happier? For you, Scott, however you define happiness for yourself, that might be the way I define it for myself or different. Next week, next month, next year, if you did this or you did that, is that going to make you happier? Because I think when people ask themselves, what is happiness? Am I happy? It's really hard to figure out. But if you say, well, if you did this, do you think it would make you happier? That we understand and know. And so that's why I always talk about, like, my podcast is called Happier, because I think it's easier to think about being happier than to like achieving happiness, which suggests kind of a reaching some final end state, right? Which isn't realistic, right? That's not how human life is.
It makes a lot of sense. And I think that, that scenario you described, especially in New York, where like I'm in Miami right now, and I do find that people in Miami do slow down once in a while and enjoy life. But I actually go to New York because I enjoy it, because I enjoy the fast pace, and I enjoy the hustle, and I enjoy just all of it. It's just, it lights a fire, right? And that's good. But at the same time, on the flip side of that, your mind never slows down. You never really stop to think in this little rat race. And rat race could be 9 to 5. Rat race could be entrepreneurship. Rat race could be whatever it is. And rat race is not including just your work. It's your work, your family, your parents, your friends, your extracurricular, like this stack of things that you've built into your day to day. And we have a really good, as humans, we have this great way of just including more and more and more, not taking time down or taking time away to just think about, is this like everything we're doing, is this what we enjoy? Is this really what we want our life to look like? And I think that's the reason why people don't understand, are they happy? Is there a benchmark that they can say, this is where I'm at and this is where I want to go? And I think that we're just always in this constant race. And I'm curious, as part of your research or as part of sort of the insights or the lessons that you teach over, what would be the first step for the average person that what I just described is like, yes, that's my life. Okay, what is the practice that allows me to really reflect? Is it meditation? Is it going on a trip and not opening up email because now we're always connected? What is the thing to start somebody on that journey?
Well, I have to confess, I never do either of those things. I am a person who's tried meditation 3 times, including a silent meditation retreat. It is not a tool that works for me. I get that many people find meditation useful. It doesn't work for me. And I never want to connect. I never like step away from my email for 24 hours. I would find that more stressful than less stressful. So that's not a practice that I would do. Not to say that other people don't find that really useful, but again, that's not a tool that I would embrace. But here's what I would say, because I think it's very confusing even to think about happiness, right? Like
it is. I want to get it black and white a little
bit. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's a way to think about it. If you're thinking about creating a happier life, you need to think about feeling good, feeling bad, feeling right in an atmosphere of growth. So what you want to do is you want to look at your life and you say, where could I have more of feeling good? Where could I have more love, more enthusiasm, more fun, more time with friends, more feelings of connection with the people who matter to me? I want to have more of whatever makes me feel good. Then you could say, well, I also want less of whatever makes me feel bad. I want less of what makes me feel guilty or angry or resentful or bored. What do I need to address so that I have less feeling bad? And I have to say, in my happiness project, this was the area that I worked in the most. Then there's feeling right. And feeling right is a little different because sometimes the things that we do to feel right don't make us feel good. Like a friend of mine said to me, like he had a really bad relationship with his father, who was a very kind of mean person, a very inattentive father. He was in the hospital, he was dying, and my friend was going to the hospital every day to see him. And he was saying, I hate going, I dread it, I don't enjoy seeing him. And when I leave, I don't feel good about it at all. And I was like, right, but you feel right. Because this is your idea of like what it means to be a son. Even though it wasn't, you don't have a great relationship, that's still what you do to feel right. Or like you might volunteer, even though it's a lot of time and energy and inconvenience and uncomfortable feelings or whatever, but you're like, this is what I do to feel right. So sometimes you do things to feel right that don't make you feel good, but you do that because living a life that reflects our values is very important to having a happier life overall. So it's not just the moment to moment feeling good, it's feeling good about our life overall. And then the final one is the atmosphere of growth. And I have to say, this took me a while to understand. But in our lives, we're happier when we have a feeling of growth, when we're learning or teaching or improving something or helping, when we see that like what we're doing is creating growth in ourselves or in other people. And so whether that's, volunteering for a nonprofit and helping them like get their finances under control, or you're raising a child, or you're picking up trash in your neighborhood as you walk by and you see a bunch of like wrappers on the sidewalk and you're like, okay, I'm just going to pick this stuff up and throw it away since I'm out here. This atmosphere of growth is really important for our happiness. And it's good because even when a lot of things are going wrong in our lives, this is something where we can create that feeling, we can control that. And so you're like, okay, everything in my life is like going wrong, but I'm going to stick to learning 3 words of Italian every day. And at the end of the year, I'm going to be so much better at Italian, and that's going to make me feel good. Well, like you said about like being too focused on getting things done, you're exactly right. Too often we focus on the to-do and we don't think about the ta-da. But the atmosphere of growth is part of what helps us feeling like we are, like we're improving ourselves or the world in some way. So feeling good, feeling bad, feeling right in an atmosphere of growth. And for each person, they might have to work on different elements of that. But I think that makes it easier to sort of pick apart what's working and not working and what you want to further work on in your life.
I think that's phenomenal advice. One of the things that like I'm really hearing you say is this value alignment, because that's the feeling good piece of it, feeling good about what you're doing. And I think that's so important, because I think that, not to say that your life is structured around doing things ethically incorrect. People are not bad, but are they really in a job for a company that champions what they believe in? Or are they even building their own company that aligns with what they believe in? And so it's not just your personal life. It's not, are you teaching your kids? Are you spending are your kids doing things and activities that you are proud of them doing? Like, it permeates everything. So it's a lot. It's a lot to think about. Oh my God, are my values actually in every single activity that I take on in my day-to-day? Is that aligned with who I am as a person? And I bet, I mean, you do the research. I bet a lot of people don't even know what their values are. They're just going through life.
No, you think, well, I just have good values and everybody that has good values has the same values as I do. And then you're like, actually, no. Like a funny example of this is spontaneity. Somebody said to me, like, as a journalist, who's like, why is it that people today can't be spontaneous and like life, like, blah, and I'm like, I don't value spontaneity. I dislike spontaneity. I go out of my way not to have spontaneity. I reject it as a value. But for the person I was talking to, like, that was a super important value to her. Now, spontaneity is not the most, let's say, it's not the most transcendent value, but it's a funny example where you're like, yeah, some people want it, some people don't. It's, it isn't a one-size-fits-all thing when it comes to values.
Have you done like a lot of, because I like to look at the author of the work as the case study for everyone else. So maybe even like, I mean, because you've done this work on your...
Yeah, research is me search when it comes to me. I'm my own guinea pig for sure.
So what have you discovered as you go through this exercise and you figure out, like, if you apply all these items to your own life, what have you discovered was misaligned? What have you discovered in terms of your own growth?
Oh, well, one of the things I learned is that, especially when my daughters were younger, is that I just was way too quick to lose my temper. I'm very irritable. I'm one of these people that wants to go. And I just was not the kind of parent that I wanted to be and that I imagined myself to be. And so when I did my first happiness project, I did a huge amount of work on just basic things like making sure that I got enough sleep, making sure that I got up early enough that like I could have my cup of coffee and get myself organized before like the all family life started. Working on how to fight right with my husband so that I could like maintain, like, not perfectly, I will admit, but better, like having a lighthearted tone, being able to joke around, being able to poke fun at myself. I did a ton to make sure that, here I am, a happiness expert, and I'm like, yelling, being snarky or snapping.
It's easy to research it. It's easy to, but it's that's the thing. It's hard to implement.
Oh, well, this is what I learned is that it is so easy to give people advice. But so many things, it's like the meditation, right? All these people recommend meditation. I'm like, well, do you meditate? Because I got to say, it doesn't work for me. Because when you really try things, sometimes you find out, well, it is a really useful tool, but it's not a tool that works for everyone. And so I really do think that, I always am my own guinea pig. Well, one of the things that I talk about the most is this Four Tendencies personality framework that I developed. And one of the reasons that I developed it is that as I was writing my book Better Than Before, that's all about habit formation, I started to get the understanding that I was a real outlier, that I wasn't average, like that my experience was not typical.
No, but explain that. Explain. Yeah.
Okay, so let me explain the Four Tendencies, and then I'll explain more.
So I was going to go to Four Tendencies in a sec. Okay, but the only question I had, and then we'll go there, because then I want to understand your own experience. I just wanted, I mean, if people know your work, if they're listening to this podcast, before we go into the Four Tendencies, somebody wants to do their own happiness project, very tactile, like think of some tactics that they can do to start this process.
Okay, I'll give you some quick answers, but if people really want a specific answer, because I get this exact question all the time, and it's kind of unsatisfying for me to give broad strokes because really it is very different for everyone. I created a quiz. It's called Habits for Happiness. Go to GretchenRubin.com/quiz, and it will kind of remarkably, in just like 11 questions, tell you the habit that you should focus on. Not just you like a person, but like you, Scott. What is the specific habit that for you is the one that is going to most move the needle? It asks you a series of questions that will remarkably get you to that answer. So go to GretchenRubin.com/quiz, and you can get a very specific answer. But if I was going to give an answer, if you were going to be like, yeah, but Gretchen, what's the answer that like is the most universal answer? Mm-hmm. That's clear. You want to do things that are going to deepen and broaden your relationships with other people. We are social creatures. You were mentioning kind of biology before. Like, we're a very social species. We rely on other people. And to be happy, we need to be able to confide. We need to be able to get support. And just as important for happiness, we need to be able to give support. We need to feel like we belong. We need to have deep, intimate bonds. And so if you're thinking about how to use your precious time, energy, or money, anything that is going to deepen a relationship, like, should I go to my college reunion, right? Yes, probably that's going to make you happier because that's going to deepen an old relationship. Or broadening relationship. Hey, should I join that poker group? Yeah, probably, because you'll meet some new people and hang out with them, and that'll broaden your social relationships, and that's probably going to make you happier. So, and this is ancient philosophers and contemporary scientists agree. If there's one thing, it's relationships. When they look at people who say they're the happiest, they tend to have more friends. If they ask somebody at work, are you happy at work? There are people who say, I have a friend at work, not just like a friendly acquaintance that I'm like, talking about sports and pop culture with, but someone who has my back, someone I could tell a secret to. Or do you have a manager, like the person you report to directly, who cares about you and helping you to achieve your aims for yourself? Not some visionary boss who's standing at the top of the pyramid, but somebody that is connected with you, who like wants to see you succeed. Those are the kinds of things that make people happy at work and at home and in life. So thinking about relationships is always a great place to start.
Hey guys, Scott here. I just wanted to take a quick moment to say a heartfelt thanks to every single one of you. 6 years of this show, and it's really all because of you. Your listens, your support, your shares. It's what keeps this thing going. When I started, I had no idea how big this would get, how many lives we touch, the stories we share, the lessons that we learn together. It's truly humbling, and I believe that we're building something really special here. A community where no one has to reinvent the wheel. We're all in this together, learning and growing. And here's my ask. If you love this show, if it's made a difference for you, please share it with somebody who needs it. Tell a friend, post on social, whatever works. It's the best way to keep this thing going strong, bring on even better guests, and share more life-changing wisdom. And you can find us on all the spots. So you can go to successstorypodcast.com if you like listening to podcasts. If you like video, you can go to YouTube. It's youtube.com/c/Scott D. Clary, or the newsletter.scottdclary.com. Just spread the word. I'm eternally grateful for each and every one of you. Let's keep learning, let's keep growing, and let's keep making this world a little bit better together. All right, let's get back to the show. I would assume then post-COVID, you saw a massive decline in happiness.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, and we're still kind of working through it, right? Because what does it mean to connect with people virtually when we're really IRL is better than URL? And we're still trying to figure that out. How do you work? You're seeing so much conversation about companies struggling to balance employees' value of flexibility with the employer's, conviction that office culture and office cohesion are built on face-to-face. It's like, how do we reconcile these two values? It's still being worked out. And yeah, COVID was really, really rough because it was...
I was going to say it's interesting because if employers want you to come back into the office, I think that just happened. Amazon just asked people to come in 5 days a week, and people are pushing back on that because they want to stay home. But then the question is, are they actually jeopardizing their own happiness by cutting off the only social connections they have through their 9 to 5?
Well, it depends, because maybe there might have all kinds of other values that are being served by working flexibly. And that's part of the problem, is that people are in very different situations. If you look at what makes people unhappy, I'll tell you one thing that makes people unhappy consistently, and they never adjust to it, because often we're very flexible, and we can really adjust to a lot of things and be pretty happy with circumstances that are tough, but you never adjust to a bad commute. It will bum you out every single time. And one of the things that people want from flexible work is they want to commute, spend less time commuting. So that's very understandable, like if you can walk to work, that's very different from like if you've got, an hour and 15-minute drive, or you're fighting traffic for an hour to go just across town. So anyway, these things are complicated because they hit different people very differently in different stages of their lives and in different circumstances. And so, we just never questioned it before. Like, it was always just like, well, of course you have to go in 5 days a week. Yeah. Nobody even ever thought. It was very edge for people to talk about remote or work from home. And it wasn't, most people didn't.
No. So now we're dealing with a whole set of, a whole set of problems, because now there's so many options. So now you're balancing, okay, so you don't want somebody to be depressed and lonely at home, but they also hate the commute. That's time and energy and money. And then, okay, so coming to the office is good for the work, but it's good for the employer, but is it good for the worker? And now you're balancing all these different dynamics. Just makes work more complicated.
And then you have to think of like, how much office space do we have? What's the experience when you show up? I mean, there's a million things that we're still in the very early stages of grappling with the long-term implications. So it's complicated.
Well, that's why you have to keep doing research, so we understand more.
Right.
That's exactly got about.
That's right. It's always something new, right?
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to Four Tendencies. First of all, before we even get there, why did these tendencies come up? Where did they come from?
Okay. I created them because I was working on my book about habit change, and I started seeing patterns emerge that I couldn't explain. Certain people would say like exactly the same thing in exactly the same words. Like people would say, "Well, I'll keep a New Year's resolution when I think it's important, but I wouldn't wait for January 1st because January 1st is an arbitrary date." And they would always say that, arbitrary. And I was like, that's interesting, because the fact that January 1st is an arbitrary date really doesn't bother me. But to this class of people, that's clearly very important. But my big moment of revelation came when my sister calls me a happiness bully, because if I think there's a way for you to get happier, I can kind of get insistent. So I was drilling a friend about her happiness and her habits. And she said something that just blew my mind. She said, because I'd heard many people say something like this. She said, when I was in high school, I was on the track team and I never missed track practice. So why can't I go running on my own now? So why? So I can come up with a lot of different theories, but why? And I started thinking about that and all the arbitrary people, all these different patterns that I've observed. And then finally, I was sitting right here, right in this seat where I'm talking to you this moment. And it was like the word expectation just burst off the page to me. And I realized that the idea of expectation, how we respond to expectations, whether we meet expectations or whether we resist expectations, has this huge consequence on our behavior, on how we form habits successfully or not successfully, and also many, many aspects of our life. And so that's and it took a long time. I mean, it was just like the hardest intellectual undertaking I ever did, because I now I can see, oh, there are these 4 categories and they fit together in a diamond Venn diagram, and it's super elegant. I feel like it was like the periodic table of the elements, right? It's got this kind of the elegance of nature. But of course, I didn't know that when I was coming up with it. I was like, are there 5? Maybe there are 6. Like,
it's like you're figuring out like E equals MC squared for the first time.
That's what it felt like. Yeah. That is exactly what it felt like. And then I remember, like, when I saw how they all fit together, because I was trying to do a 2x2, but it's actually an interlocking Venn diagram. And once I saw that, it was like every single example that I could think of all fit into these 4 categories. And it was so elegant. It's so straightforward. And the thing is about the four tendencies, and the 4 tendencies are upholder, questioner, obliger, or rebel. They are so obvious once you hear them. You will see them in the people around you. You can see them on TV. I can tell you the tendencies of the Game of Thrones characters. I can do the characters on The Office. They're Mad Men. They're really obvious to see because these are just like deep just aspects of human nature. So anyway, I'm super proud of.
You should be. That's impressive.
I know. I sort of can't believe I figured it out. And of course, I was terrified for like the first 3. I was like, surely I'm not the first person to figure this out, right? So I was like worried that I would find out that somebody else had figured it out long before. But as far as I know, I'm the first person to figure this out.
So explain people who have done, let's think of like a business like a DISC profile or like a Myers-Briggs, all these different, all these. So what are those versus the 4 tendencies? What does the 4 tendency framework show you about yourself that the other ones would not?
I think all the frameworks have their own power, their own strength, their own vocabulary. They're all looking at human nature in a little bit of a different way. But the 4 tendencies it describes a very narrow aspect of your nature, but a very significant aspect of your nature. And so I think it's more precise because it's just more specific in what it's trying to explain. And yet what it explains is very important. So I would say that is what I would say is different. And it's very predictive. Like I can often say like, well, if you're a questioner, did people say this to you when you were in grade school? Do you have this kind of argument with your sweetheart? Do you run into this kind of problem at work? Do you find yourself saying these words? And people will often just like burst in laughing and say like, oh my, or like I'll give a talk and everybody in the audience will start pointing to one coworker and just like cracking up because they're like,
so funny. This
is the person. Like we get it. Like here's Exhibit A, because it's very easy to spot. Whereas I think something like the, Myers-Briggs, you're kind of like, well, I'm a little bit of this and I'm a little bit of that. And maybe I'm that. It's kind of, I don't know. I can get but they're all valuable, I think, because they help us with self-knowledge. And
but I think that's really the goal, right? Like, I think, first of all, if you even know what any of these tests are good for you, because that's already a level of self-awareness that I don't even think enough people pay attention to. Like, I knew of these tests. I mean, DISC is a very common hiring test, right? Now people use Myers-Briggs as well. But I think that just having these tools at your disposal and being able to look inside and understand how you operate in this world, I think is very important. It's so powerful because you're not leaving life to chance. You know exactly what scenarios you should be putting yourself in, removing yourself from, who you can work with, how you operate, how you work, what stresses you out, what makes you happy, what makes you not so happy. I think these are great tools. I mean, so I want you to just sort of walk through, if you can, like the 4 tendencies, what they are at a high level, so people can start to wrap their mind around, and they're going to listen to, oh, that's me, that's not me, and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. Listen to all 4 before you decide what you are. So again, I'm going to describe it. And the truth is most people will know exactly what they are from this brief description. But if you want to take a quiz that will spit out an answer and give you a report, you can go to gretchenrubin.com/quiz. Again, like 3 million people have taken this quiz. It's free. But again, I'll just describe it briefly. Most people will know what they are. And I will say this, be honest. Because sometimes people sort of answer the way they wish they were, but all of these tendencies include people who are wildly successful and also people who struggle. They all have strengths and weaknesses. So, be honest. Okay. So what the 4 tendencies looks at is how you respond to expectations. And we all face two kinds of expectations. Outer expectations like a work deadline. An inner expectation like a request from a friend, like a work deadline. An inner expectation like your own desire to keep a New Year's resolution. So depending on whether you meet or resist outer and inner expectations, that's what makes you an upholder, a questioner, an obliger, or a rebel. So upholders are people who readily meet both outer and inner expectations. So they meet the work deadline, they keep the New Year's resolution without much fuss. They're very focused on execution. They love schedules and to-do lists. They don't need a lot of supervision. They're very disciplined. Once they make up their mind to do something, they'll do it. They tend to love like reviewing rules. So their motto is, discipline is my freedom. Then there are questioners. Questioners question all expectations. They'll do something if they think it makes sense. So they're making everything an inner expectation. If something makes sense to them, they'll do it no problem. If it doesn't make sense to them, they will push back. So they love customization. They love reasons. They're always asking for more justification. They can sometimes, in fact, suffer from analysis paralysis when their desire for perfect information makes it hard for them to make a decision or move forward. Strangely, a lot of times questioners don't like to answer questions. Funnily enough, they like to teach, but they don't like to be questioned themselves. Ironic but true, I'm married to a questioner. I experienced this myself. So their motto is, I'll comply if you convince me why. Then there are obligers. Obliger is the biggest tendency for both men and women. You either are an obliger or you have many obligers in your life. So obliger needs a lot of attention because it's a big category. Obligers readily meet outer expectations, but they struggle to meet inner expectations. So these are the people who say things like, why can I keep my promises to other people, but I can't keep my promises to myself? This is my friend on the track team. When she had a team and a coach waiting for her, she showed up with no problem. But when she was trying to go on her own, she struggled. These are people who talk about the problem of self-care. These are people who talk about, why can't I make myself a priority? The solution, and it's a very simple solution for an obliger, is even to meet an inner expectation, an obliger must have a system of outer accountability. If you want to read more, join a book group. If you want to exercise, work out with a friend who's going to be annoyed if you don't show up, pay a trainer, take your dog for a run who's going to be disappointed if she doesn't get to go for a run, raise money for a charity that's important to you. Think about your duty to be a role model to other people. There's a lot of ways to have outer accountability, but it has to be a form of outer accountability, even for an inner expectations, because and that's just what works for obligers. And obligers, but the one thing is, spouses and sweethearts often don't make good accountability partners for a very romantic reason. It's like, oh, honey, I'm so close to you that you're like me, and so I'm going to ignore you just the way I would ignore me. So you got to get that outer accountability if you were an obliger. Then the smallest tendency is the rebel. It's a conspicuous tendency, but this is the one that the fewest people fall into. Rebels resist outer and inner expectations alike. They want to do what they want to do in their own way and in their own time. They can do anything they want to do, anything they choose to do, but if you ask them to do something, they are very likely to resist. And typically they don't tell themselves what to do. Like, they don't sign up for the 10 a.m. spin class on Saturday because they think, I don't want to put something on my calendar, and just the idea that somebody's expecting me to show up is going to annoy me. So their motto is, you can't make me, and neither can I. And I will say this, as you're thinking about this, if you're thinking to yourself, I question the validity of this framework, you're probably a questioner. And also, if you are thinking to yourself, I fit all four categories, I'm equally all four, that is also a questioner. Because what you're doing is you're saying, well, if it's appropriate to act like a rebel, I'll act like a rebel. But if it's appropriate to act like an upholder, I'll act like an upholder. Because you're saying, why would I act that way? That is a big sign of questioner. Upholders, obligers, and rebels recognize they are firmly in that tendency. So if you're not sure, that's a sign of questioner.
Is there benefit to trying, or is it even possible to to change your category if you recognize who you are?
Well, I don't think so. I don't think you can change your I'm a firm believer in the genetic roots of personality, and I really think that this is something that's hardwired. But also, I don't know why you don't need to change your tendency, because every tendency has strengths and weaknesses. And if you're experiencing like a downside or a limitation of your tendency, rather than trying to change your inner nature, which is very hard, if even possible, it's like fix the problem. So if you're an obliger, like obligers will sometimes say, well, I want to be an upholder because I want to exercise regularly. I'm like, well, you don't have to be an upholder to do that. You just have to have outer accountability to do that.
So you understand the levers that you pull in this particular circumstance.
Right. You just have to like use what you know about your tendency to achieve your aim for yourself. Because that's much more straightforward. I'm like, that's the easy solution, which is just like, get what you want. Don't try to change your whole personality, because that's like, is that even possible? And like, that's not even what you want. You want to achieve a certain aim for yourself. And you think, well, if I were a different tendency, it would be easier. Well, you just fix it for your tendency, because all these tendencies have strengths and weaknesses.
Why? How does expectation play such a big role in how we go through life?
Just part of life. I mean, that's part of, if you're at work, you're surrounded by expectations. If you're at home,
it just weighs on us. It forces our hand.
But it's part of life. I mean, a life without expectations would be a life of meaninglessness, because it would mean nobody's counting on you for anything. I can't even imagine what that would be. I mean,
it's such a novel concept coming into it fresh and not living in it. Like, it makes so much sense when you say it, but then you don't. I think it's almost a little jarring to understand how much expectation, both internal and external, plays on how you navigate through life. Like, it's not a comfortable thought, because I've never thought about that. I know expectation exists, but I've never thought about how much it impacts every little thing that I do.
Yes. No, it does. That's true. Well, but see, this goes to my point. Like, I'm an upholder. So I'm and upholder is the second smallest. So rebel is the smallest, and upholder is only slightly bigger. We're like the fringe personality types. And like, as I was saying, when I was studying habits, I realized I'm not typical, because I realized, like, when you say that about expectations, as an upholder, we're very comfortable with expectations. Like, we kind of thrive on expectations. So for me, that's a very kind of almost reassuring like way of thinking about things. But see, you're saying, whoa, back up. Like, so this is interesting, right? Because it's showing that we have different perspectives. This is one of I remember I was talking to somebody, I hadn't come up with my framework yet, so I didn't know that this person was a rebel. But as it turns out, she's like one of my OG rebels. This was a super important conversation that I had with her that showed me how differently an upholder and a rebel think. Because when I told her I was writing a book about habits, which to me was like a super exciting and energizing topic, she literally took a step back from me because the idea was so loathsome to her. And she's like, why in the world would you like volunteer to write a book about a subject that's just like, ugh, so awful? I was like, whoa, that's interesting. I love the idea of habits. To me, a life full of habits is a life of freedom and possibility. But you don't feel that way. That's interesting. So that was a really important conversation, because I was like, whoa, there's a totally different perspective here that I hadn't realized.
I just want to take a second to thank the sponsor of today's episode, HubSpot. Now, HubSpot has an incredible podcast network. Success Story is part of it. And if you like Success Story, you're going to love other podcasts in their network. One of my favorites is iDigress. It's hosted by Troy Sandage. What Troy does exceptionally well is in under 30 minutes, he helps eliminate complexity, complications, confusion in your business. He talks about frameworks, strategies that really work to help you achieve scalable and sustainable success. So you need to go listen to iDigress, one of the most useful podcasts for entrepreneurs and founders, part of the HubSpot podcast network, wherever you get your podcasts. That's so interesting. Oh, and when you now go through life, I mean, with family, spouse, children, peers, how do these frameworks, should they impact how you go through life? And
1,000%. No, you can save yourself so much time and energy and conflict and procrastination and misunderstanding if you know about the tendencies. So, okay, like I said that I'm married to a questioner. As an upholder, I'm like, if he asks me to do something, I just do it. And I'm like, it must be important to you if you ask me to do it. Like, I don't even really care. Like, whatever, I'll just take your word for it. If you want this phone number, I'll just give it to you. But with my husband, it's not like that. It's like, he's got to know why. And so I've learned that I'm like, hey, what time are we leaving in the morning? Because I want to know if I have time to work out. Because if I just say, what time are we leaving in the morning? He won't answer me. Or he'll say, why do you need to know? And I'm like, why do you care? Just answer me. But I always now am trying to give him the reason. Like, we need to get the guest room cleared out because my parents are coming on Friday and we're not going to have time on Thursday to move the Peloton. So we need to do it tonight because we're not going to have time tomorrow. And then they're coming the next morning. It's like, okay, so I understand. You're not asking me to do it just arbitrarily. It's like, you're asking me to do it for a reason. And this is why now is the time. I just have to give him those reasons. With an obliger, it's always creating that outer accountability. Something that as an upholder, I used to say to people, and now I realize how unhelpful it was, is I would say things like, well, I don't need to be your babysitter. Just do it when it makes sense for you and get it to me when you're ready. Or if something's important to you, you'll make time for it. And if not, not. Or, not understanding why other people really need outer accountability. And then when I'm communicating with rebels, oh, wow, I have a friend that I collaborate with who's a rebel. And it's always like, hey, man, I'm doing this thing. If this sounds fun for you, if this is the kind of thing that works for your audience, I was thinking that this could be something that would be fun for us to do. But, but if you've got the time and this seems like the kind of thing that's interesting, because it's like the more I'm like, hey, is this what you want? Is this something that's interesting to you? That's going to be interesting to him. If I'm something like, hey, I just read this newsletter and we should really do this thing. Why don't we get something on the calendar? That's just like going to be an immediate turnoff for him. Not that he can't maybe get himself to do it, but it's like, it's just going to rub him the wrong way. It's going to like set his teeth on edge. Like, you're telling me I should do something. You're giving me a deadline instead of opening up the idea that this is a possibility that someone might be excited about. That's just, and the thing is, it sounds effortful when I say this, but it's like once you start thinking this way, you can just communicate just much more easily with people. And then you're just speaking their language, and that's just, then you're just communicating more effectively. And that's really exciting.
I mean, it just removes all the friction in all your relationships
because you don't even realize you're putting friction in. You don't realize you're creating problems for people. And there's all kinds of ways that miscommunication can occur. Okay, so here's an example. So I collaborate with people. I have my Happier podcast and I collaborate with people sometimes. And there was somebody I worked with. And I'm the kind of person where if I have an idea in the middle of the night or like I get up at 5 a.m. to work, and if I think of a question for you or I need some piece of information, I'll just fire off an email. But I'm not saying, oh, you got to answer me right away. I just want to get it off my mind, right? I just want to get it done. And now it's on your to-do list, not my to-do list. But this person that I worked with had a very different view. She was an obliger, and she felt like the minute that I sent an email, I created an expectation that she would reply. And she felt very much, she didn't tell me this directly, but I heard about it indirectly, that I was ignoring office hours, that I was really pushing boundaries, that I was being very, very inconsiderate of her by peppering her with these emails at all hours. And she was getting very, very resentful. So what happens? Okay, so did the two of us go into HR and say, okay, what is in the policy handbook? Do we sit down and we say, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, whatever? Do we pull rank? What do we do? No, I learned to use delay delivery in Outlook. And so whenever I have an email at 5 a.m., I just put it in and then I put, delay delivery till 9 a.m. Monday morning. And then I'm respecting the way I like to work. And I'm also respecting the way that she likes to work, because it's not that one of us is right and one of us is wrong. It's just that we have different perspectives and we respond differently to circumstances. And so when we can talk about it openly, instead of like feeling upset about it or that it's a personal attack or that people are being inconsiderate, you're just like, hey, this is how it makes me feel. Or questioners often drain and overwhelm people with their constant questioning. And they have to learn like, hey, it makes me feel very defensive when you question all of my judgments. I feel like you're really undermining my authority. Like instead of raising your hand, and making a meeting take 3 times as long as everybody else wants to take it, why don't you like summarize your questions in an email? Then I can gather my thoughts and I can answer you like in a way where you get the information that you want, but we keep the meeting moving and we don't have like this protracted thing that's just a pain for everyone. And again, it's like, there's something wrong with that. There's a lot of value in the questions that questioners ask, but they can be draining and overwhelming for people. And so again, it's like, okay, let me get you what you want, but in a way that works for me. And so again, it's just like, it's just creating a frictionless, you're exactly right. It's like removing the friction that doesn't even need to be there. It's just that we don't understand why it's there. Because we think everybody sees the world the way we do.
We can't articulate why there's this friction, and that's exactly it. We always think that everybody else sees the world the same way as us.
It's so hard not to be seeing the world that you see it, the way that you just are assuming that people are bringing the same energy to things. It's just, but that's why I like, and sometimes people will say, well, I don't like categories, because also questioners often say this, because, people are so nuanced and like these categories are so broad and crude. And how can you say that all of humanity fits into one of 4 categories? And I'm like, the thing is, it's helpful to have these generalizations, because then we have a vocabulary where we can agree on. We have a shorthand, so we can kind of communicate quickly. If somebody says to me like, hey, I'm an obliger, I need a deadline, I'm like, hey, I gotcha. Like, let's figure this out. Or like, I hate deadlines, because as an upholder, they make me feel like so much pressure that I feel like I have to do the work right away. And you can't do everything right away, it turns out. So I was just working with an editor, and she said, well, let's agree on a deadline. And I was like, here's the thing, I'm super conscientious and I hate deadlines. Can we just not have a deadline? Because it will just stress me out, and it won't help me work any better. And she's like, 1,000%, I understand that. But see, if I had been an obliger, I might have said, and she'd said, oh, you don't need a deadline, just get it to me when you're ready. If I knew that I were an obliger, I might say, hey, you know what? I work much better with a deadline. Why don't we agree on a deadline? And then when I know that you're expecting it in 2 weeks, that's going to help me like pace my work and get it to you, because otherwise it might always just float to the bottom of the to-do list, and I'm not going to do it in a timely way, and that's going to let you down, and I'm going to let myself down. So again, it's like, just know we're coming back to this over and over again. Know yourself. Begin with what's true for you.
So, okay, so this, I hope it's not a stretch. I don't think it's going to be a stretch, because when you were writing Better Than Before, this is when you started to understand this whole four quadrant.
And then I went on and wrote a whole book about it, because all anybody wanted to ask what's the Four Tendencies. But yeah, I got my glimpse into it when I was trying to understand patterns and habit formation.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. So we just spoke about how to apply these habits so that you understand how you work, how to interact with your peers, your family, your friends, whatever, anyone in your life. From the lens of habit formation, how do you apply these 4 tendencies to build better habits or to build better routines?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's one of the main reasons people use it. Okay. So let's say you want to have the habit of going for a 30-minute walk every day, right? So if you're an upholder, what you would want to do is you'd want to put it on the calendar. Because for upholders, if something's on the calendar, it happens. Like you just say, I'm going to go every morning, 7:30, or before breakfast, or whatever it is. And if it's on the calendar, it will happen. And that for upholders that's very easy. Like that is one of the things that's nice about being upholders. Pretty easy to make habits. For questioners, it's all about the reasons. They need the strategy of clarity, which is why. So they need to be very clear, like, why is it a half an hour? Why is it 10,000 steps instead of 15 or 8,000 steps? Like, why 10? Why in the morning? If you have a doctor who said, okay, you should take this medication with meals, it's like, well, why with meals? It would be more convenient for me to customize it and take all my medication together before bed. It's like, you've got to give them a reason. So if you're a questioner and you run, and this is often what paralyzes questioners when it comes to exercise, because they're like, well, maybe I should be going for a walk, but maybe I should be doing high intensity weight training, or maybe I should be doing more intense cardio, or, maybe, I heard about this. I heard stretching is really important. And I'm like, but questioners are really good at meeting their inner expectations. So I'm like, if you're not meeting an inner expectations, it's because you're not clear on why this is the right thing for you. Get the clarity, and then your actions will follow. Obligers, the answer is outer accountability. There's a lot of ways to create outer accountability. That is what you need. You could pay for a class, pay for a trainer. Think of some obligers can even have like imaginary, what I would consider imaginary accountability, like accountability to their future self, or like to an app. I have an app, the Happier app, and like just like having a don't break the chain for some obligers, a don't break the chain tracker is enough, or like have an accountability partner. My sister's an obliger, and she has a friend where every day they try to get to 10,000 steps, and along the way they'll just say like 6,000, or 7,500. And so that it's like, okay, we got to, and then we got to get to 10,000. So she just knows that somebody's checking in on her. For an obliger, that is the key thing. It's the outer accountability. Again, there's a million ways to create it. That's what they need. With a rebel, it's really, there's two kinds of things that work for rebels. One is identity. This is the kind of person you are. You're not doing it because you're supposed to, or because somebody told you to, or even because you promised that you would. It's the kind of person you are. You're an athlete. You're a person who respects your body. You're a bicyclist. Like, and, you know, and then often they kind of like to do things that like are a little bit like, you know, kind of meeting a challenge. Like, you say I can't run the marathon in 2025, watch me. Or maybe they like to like get around the rules a little bit. Like I know a friend who's like, I exercise like during my work day, like they're trying to keep me behind in my screens, but I'm like out there going for a hike. So for him, it was like kind of that feeling of like, you're not the boss of me, even if you are the boss of me. Or information consequences choice. And this often works if you're dealing with a rebel. So like, let's say this often comes up with healthcare providers. Let's say you're a doctor and you have a rebel and it's really important that rebel begin to exercise or do physical therapy after surgery, say, right? Now, if you say you have to do it or it's doctor's orders that you do it, that's not going to be useful to them. But what you can give them is information consequences choice. You give them the information they need to make a decision. You tell them the consequences of their action or inaction, and then you let them decide. So you could say something like, okay, well, let me just tell you what we see. So with people who did your surgery, the people who do the exercises, you know, after 6 months, they're off the pain medication. They're up, they're traveling, they're dressing themselves, they're getting around, like they're doing anything they want. You know, we see really good results for the people who follow through with physical therapy. The people who don't do the physical therapy, well, we see that they're stuck on pain medication. They are not independent. They've got people who maybe are helping them dress or helping them bathe. They're not jumping on a bus or a plane. They're very limited in their movements. You know, so up to you. You can do the physical therapy or not. That's your choice. Here's a pamphlet if you want a pamphlet. If that works, if that's interesting to you, if you think that's useful, I got this pamphlet. Or not. It's up to you. Because the more you push, the more you nudge, the more you remind, the more you rescue a rebel, the more you ignite their spirit of resistance. And with some rebels, even if you praise them, they feel like you're trying to control them. So it's for some rebels, if you even said something like, oh, Scott, it's so great that you've been following your doctor's orders and you've been doing your physical therapy so conscientiously. Some rebels will be like, what? You think that I'm doing what that guy told me to do? No way. I'm not doing that.
So funny.
You got to be careful with rebels because sometimes you make things worse. Like, let them do their thing in their way. They can do anything they want to do. Like, a lot of times we mess them up.
You have to know so, you know, when you lay out these personality types and these tendencies, like if you want to change your habit, like this is why people have such a high failure rate. They don't even know. They don't even know how they respond to external, internal stimuli, expectation. And if you knew, your chance of actually adopting a new habit or taking on a new routine, it probably goes up 100x if you actually know how you go through this world.
Though, well, that's why in the Happier app, my app, it takes you through the Four Tendencies quiz so that it can you can use any tool you want, but it'll suggest the ones that are that are going to suit you best. For your tendency, because you're exactly right. Because here's the thing, certain approaches work really well for some tendencies, but they're counterproductive for other tendencies. So if you keep saying to somebody, you just need to sign up for a class, well, a rebel is going to resist that. That's terrible advice for a rebel. But if you say to somebody, if you say to an obliger, well, you just need to get clear on what you want, and when you know what's important to you, your actions will follow. That's not going to happen. They can sit around and think about what's important to them or how motivated they are all day long. It's not that that's a bad idea to have that kind of clarity, but it's not going to move the needle for them. What an obliger needs is outer accountability. That's what works. And this is what, to me, is so powerful about the Four Tendencies. It's kind of like, you can throw spaghetti against the wall all you want, and maybe you'll get lucky and you'll hit the match. And a lot of times people do sort of intuitively start to understand what they need. Like, you'll see that obligers will kind of figure out ways to create outer accountability because they kind of have intuited that that's what works for them. But this way you just know, and you're just like, okay, well, let me just plug that in. I feel like it's just so much easier. Or, accountability is very burdensome. As an upholder, I realize I don't need accountability. And so I don't need to worry about having it because I don't really need it. Because otherwise it's kind of a pain to have accountability. It can be super valuable and it's worth it if you need it.
But it could actually upset you if you're an upholder and you have no problem going to the gym, but you know that everybody else is getting a trainer, and then you do get a trainer, and then they're harping on you to finish the workout or to stick to the diet plan. That could actually, it won't throw you off or stop you from doing it, but you could like the activity less because you're now getting this external stimuli you didn't even need. So you're like, F you, buddy. You don't need to tell me, I'm already doing it.
Well, and at the very least, you're paying for something that you don't need because you think, well, everybody needs a trainer. It's like, but do you need a trainer? That's what a lot of people are saying to me, like, oh, I just thought everybody had to have it. I'm like, some people absolutely do. And some people benefit it, like with some things for me, even though I'm an upholder, for some ways accountability is helpful. But you're exactly right. Like, it can mess with you if you're just like, kind of just assuming that everything that works for everybody else will work for you, but it can end up like really just messing with what you would do on what comes naturally to you. And like questioners, they might feel like, okay, this person is telling me things, but it doesn't make sense. And so now I'm just irritated with this person who I feel like is like, why are they arbitrarily changing this thing? Or I want to customize it and they insist that I need to do it their way. It's true. It's like, do what's right for you and don't assume that that just more is better.
I have to take a second and thank the sponsor of today's podcast, LinkedIn. Now, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs isn't just a job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. And did you know that in a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites? So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. What really amazed me was how quickly I found qualified candidates on LinkedIn. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's like hiring professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. As small business owners, we're always juggling multiple responsibilities. LinkedIn understands this and constantly finds ways to make the hiring process easier. They've even launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even quicker. And it's really no wonder why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. I can't recommend it enough for finding top-notch professionals who could take your business to the next level. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/excellence. That's linkedin.com/excellence to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Are there ways, this is the last question I have on this. I find it fascinating, but I want to ask one more topic about habits, which I think is interesting. But before we go into that, are there ways when you just go into a net new conversation with somebody you've never met before to understand kind of where they fit? You know where I'm going with it, obviously, because I want to make sure that I'm
the evaluation. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So on my website, GretchenRubin.com, there is a thing where flash evaluation.
By the way, because I love that you've put all this stuff on your website because this is actually very helpful. And I love tests and quizzes that just like very simply, because not everybody has access to you, right? Not everyone has access to you directly. So it's good to be able to go.
But what's funny is there really are tells. There really are things that you can tell. Or like I'm in conversation with somebody and I'm starting to be like, okay. So one is the word arbitrary. It is amazing how often questioners will mention that something is arbitrary. 5 requirements to a dressing room. It's arbitrary. 65 miles per hour. It's arbitrary. My boss says that we all have to use the same software. I don't see the rationale for that. So that is and then if you feel like somebody is overloading you with questions, even about things that like maybe you're like, why are you even asking me that? Like, oh, let's have I made a reservation at an Italian restaurant. Why? And you're like, because why? Reasons? That's a sign of questioner. Obligers are the easiest to spot because these are the people that say, why do I keep my promises to other people, but I can't keep my promises to myself? Whenever you hear about somebody about like, I don't understand why I can't make myself a priority. When people will even say pridefully, I give 1,000% to other people, so of course I have nothing for myself. Like I give 110% to my patients, so who could have time to exercise? That is always the sign that it's an obliger. And remember, those are the two. Obliger is the biggest tendency, and the second biggest is questioner. So if you're talking to somebody, if you're guessing that someone is an obliger or questioner, the numbers are on your side. it's easier to spot upholders and rebels because they are more extreme. With rebels, it's people where they do what they want when they want. They will not, if you ask or tell them to do something, they're very likely to resist. They will often, like, if you tell them to do something that they were going to do anyway, they might not do it. Like a rebel teenager said to me, like, I like having my room neat. And sometimes, like, I'm making my bed and my mother says, don't forget to make your bed. And then I, like, unmake my bed because I just, like, I'm not going to let her tell me what to do. So that kind of behavior is rebel. And then the upholder is really when you do, and I will say this as a rebel, we are often called rigid. We are often called judgmental because, like, we get an idea in our head of how things are supposed to go, and then we will start to execute. So when you see that kind of, like, sort of, you know, like the kid that remembers to bring their homework in every day and feed their pet without reminders, that's kind of the upholder vibe. The more you know about it, you start to get a feeling for people pretty quickly. It's funny how people just do communicate a certain vibe, but there is the flash evaluation. And a lot of times people want this for clients because they want to communicate more effectively with clients. And then also it comes up a lot for teachers and then also in healthcare because these are really professions where you're trying to get people to do what you want them to do, but willingly. You know, and how do you get them to buy in? So that's why I created that, because so many people were sort of like, I can't make this person take the quiz, but can you give me are there any signs? So
yeah, that's great. I'm just thinking from like a work context. If I jumped on a Zoom call with a new client or somebody who's like a peer, and I'm like, hey, can you send me a Calendly invite for a meeting next week at so-and-so a time, and you see if they do it or if they don't or if they push back, like just like a little ask, it's just like such a,
I never thought of that.
Yeah.
That's an interesting idea. Like throw something out, like a minor request out and see if they're like done or if when do you need it by, or like, why are you asking me to do this? Or like somebody who's like, no.
Because I know some people, you'll ask them to say, because, you know, when you're going and booking a meeting and then you like, hey, can you send a Calendly invite? And some people send it right away because they're so enthusiastic. And other times that meeting invite never comes because in their head, they're like, why is this guy asking me? Why didn't he just send it himself? And there's some sort of hesitation there. So you can start to categorize people as where they fit. The very, very little ask, right? Almost like trivial, nothing.
Interesting. I would ponder that.
I don't know if I'm right or not, but maybe you let me know.
Depends on, like, does somebody have an assistant? Like, there could be confounding things there, but it is interesting, like, to see how somebody would respond. Like, one thing people often say is like, well, how do I communicate so that it reaches all four tendencies? And that's very hard to do. You know, and I can get into like how you would communicate, but like one of the things that I think of as there's like one message that's so short and so powerful. This message has not been promulgated in decades, and yet we all know it. And I think it's because it works so beautifully with all four tendencies. It's so elegant a solution. And that is the message, only you can prevent forest fires. Because think about it. It works with upholders. It works with questioners, it works with obligers, and it works with rebels. And so in one very short phrase, like all of those tendencies are hearing that message. Only you can prevent forest fires. It's really beautiful. That's very hard. Usually you can't do it that succinctly, for sure. But
what you did there, I was going to say what you did is you positioned it so that it doesn't offend anyone's expectations, and each four tendency would interpret that sentence differently.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
But you could find ways to structure commands or request. It's very hard. I don't know.
But it's a useful exercise. Or you can just think about, like, I'm going to set something up. I'm going to make sure that I have the reasons. I'm going to make sure that I have a deadline. I'm going to make sure that I have an out for people who want to do something a different way. I mean, you can think about, as you're communicating, how you could make sure that you're communicating effectively with all four. It might not be that with such brevity, But it's certainly something that you can think about. Or if you're dealing like with a client, you can start thinking like, okay, this person is asking me questions. I need to really come forward with all of the reasons and all my justifications and all my rationale and all my science and my research. And do you want to go through like the pricing structure and explain like why the pricing structure is exactly this way? Whereas with somebody else, they're like, oh my God, I don't want to know the details. Is this going to get me the result I want? If so, yes. It's like, hey, I know you're an innovator. I know you like the newest thing. Hey, I think this is going to be interesting to you. See if you think this could solve your problem. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. You know your customer, you know your client. But we find that for people like you, this kind of thing often works. Check it out if you want. I'll give you a free month.
Yeah.
It's the rebel. But that's not going to work for the questioner.
It's fascinating. Yeah, I think that the answer really is you start to understand how to figure out this tendency, like the person you're speaking to, which tendency they are, and then you start to tailor. I think it's actually easier to do that than to play this game of I'm trying to say one thing that's going to be received well by everyone. I don't think that's the answer.
Yeah, because you're right. It's just so hard. It's so hard. Yeah.
Well, the one thing I wanted to ask you, just on the topic of habits, you mentioned foundational habits. I find that interesting. So what are foundational habits, and from somebody who's trying to improve anything in their life, their marriage, their relationship with their kids, their work, their health, wellness, what are foundational habits and why are they so important?
Right. Well, and you're exactly right. So what I found in my study of habits is that there are sort of 4 areas of habit formation that are the foundation, and they are particularly important because if we get these habits under control, we're much better equipped to go on to do other habits, like work on our, like stop yelling at our spouse so much or whatever it might be. And so if you're going to start, you want to start with these. And what you'll notice is these have to do a lot with like the body and the physical experience and like your physical surroundings. And it's very easy sometimes to get up in our heads and forget that we're actually in bodies, but our physical experience will always color our emotional experience. So the foundational habits are sleeping, moving, eating and drinking, and uncluttering. So sleeping is, most adults need 7.5 hours of sleep. So maybe you need to set an alarm. Just like you set an alarm in the morning, maybe you set an alarm to help you go to bed. Maybe you have a snooze alarm that's like, okay, 10 minutes from now, I got to turn out the light. So getting enough sleep, that makes a huge difference. People who don't get enough sleep tend to think that they aren't really affected by it, but research shows that they are really affected by it. So you want to get enough sleep. Then moving, exercise. And this does not to be, you don't have to be training for a marathon. Research shows that 20 minutes of walking a day, especially if you're out in the sunshine, will do immense benefits for you. Mood, memory, immune function, it fights depression. It's the magical elixir of life. So you really want to figure out how to get more moving into your day. And then eating and drinking right. You don't want to let yourself get too hungry or thirsty because often what happens is people will they'll skip breakfast, they skip lunch, and then at 3 p.m. they're so hungry that they just are ripping open the plastic crinkly bags and they can't, So making sure that you're eating and drinking enough so that you're sort of in command of making healthy choices. And then uncluttering. So uncluttering isn't as universal. There truly are people like my sister who are clutter blind and they do not care. Like on balance, they'd like things to be neat, but it doesn't bother them. Every cabinet door is open. Junk mail is piled on the counter. They just don't see it. So there are those people, and we know those people. You know who those people are. But for most people, it is true that outer order contributes to inner calm more than you would think. And often people will say, like, once I got my physical surroundings, my office, my desk, my car, my bedroom, like orderly, got rid of like things that were broken, things that were in the wrong place, things I don't use anymore, things I can't even identify, trash, got that out of the way. You just feel more in command of yourself. It's just easier to have that self-discipline when the things around you are orderly. And I find this to be so mysterious, like it's kind of a disproportionate effect. Like somebody said to me, I finally cleaned out my fridge and now I know I can switch careers. And I'm like, I get it, but why? So I wrote a whole book, Outer Order, Inner Calm, which is sort of looking at this and like how to create order in an easy way. Because I'm like, it's just puzzling. Why? Not for everybody, but for most people, it really helps with like other habits to get like that uncluttering done.
Well, the reason why I brought up foundational habits, because you've, like, even in this podcast, we've spoken about a whole bunch of different topics, but I was trying to figure out a through line between habit formation and happiness. And I was curious, it seems like foundational habits are the prerequisite to achieving any sort of happiness. I don't think you can have happiness if you don't have your foundational habits. And I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on that. But were there any other through lines between happiness and habit formation? Or are they two very separate topics?
No, they're very much related. You're exactly right. And the reason that I got led into habit formation is I realized that a lot of times when you're talking to people about happiness, it's not that they don't know what to do to be happier. They know perfectly well what would make them happier. They'd be happier if they read more, or if they got more sleep, or if they got back into fly fishing, or if they meditated, or whatever it is. But what they have is they have a challenge in habit formation, because a lot of the things that make us happier are really about positive habits. It's not about like doing 30 days of yoga. It's about doing yoga kind of for years to come. And that's about habit formation. And so that's what led it to me, because so often people would say, well, but I know I would be happier if I exercised. Why can't I exercise? And then I'm like, well, you don't have a happiness question. You have a habit question. So how would you do it? And so what I figured out is there are 21 strategies that people use to make or break habits. And everybody uses a different set, and some of them aren't even available to us at all times. Some are kind of almost universal, or maybe really universal. Some are work really well for some people and not for others. But it's good to have all 21, because so often when we are thinking about how we would be happier, what's really affecting us is we're frustrated because we're not able to make a habit.
That makes a lot of sense. And as now I'm looking at all the different topics that you've written about, and spoke about habits and happiness, and you even did a piece on decluttering. So you even dove and gone a step deeper into some of the topics that you've done research on. What would be the next thing that you would tie into all your work? What's the next thing that's, it's almost like all the stuff that you speak about is on the human condition to a degree.
That is
What's
that is my subject is human nature, the human condition. Well, my next book that I haven't even mentioned, though it's very relevant, is Life in Five Senses, which is my book that just came out, which is all about tapping into the five senses, because it turns out that we can use our five senses, or however many senses that we personally have, to achieve so many aims for happiness, and even things that are sort of contradictory. Like you can use your five senses to like give yourself more energy, or also to calm down, and to do creative work, but also to do drudge work. And anyway, so that was all about exploring the five senses. That's an amazingly fun book. Then I have a book coming out in April of 2025, which is called Secrets of Adulthood. This is a little playbook. I love aphorisms and proverbs and koans and paradoxes. So I wrote my own little book of Secrets of Adulthood. So that is just like a little book that was just such a delight as a writer. And then my next big project is going to be about the empty nest phase, because which I am rebranding as Open Door, because I just dropped off my daughter for her freshman year of college. And you said this at the very beginning. I think you said something very profound, which is a lot of times we don't take the time, like nothing prompts us to ask the big questions. And so it's very easy to just not ask them and not think about them. And then we don't make changes that would allow us to make our lives happier. But one thing you find out is the empty nest, open door, it's a big life transition for many, many people, which almost forces you to reflect. And because there's such dramatic change to your routine, to your space, to your identity, to your purpose, to your relationships, it's a moment of reckoning. And that to me is very exciting, because I'm like, I love a moment of reckoning. And again, research is research for me. And so I'm going through this. I'm like, wow, okay, like this is going to be my book. And I'm going to write about all the things I try and do and that I learn. And it's so fascinating. So that's my next big project. But Secrets of Adulthood is the next one that's like, in the can. And that's just a delightful book. Yeah.
Well, I think the topics that you write about, your research, are so important to research, because they're things that affect everybody, but they're not things that we really understand. Like, when was the last time you heard about any research about how you leverage your senses for performance or relaxation? Or I don't. Like,
well, I follow that stuff very closely.
I read a lot, and I don't think there's a lot of content out there on that. Okay, when is that one coming out?
Life in Five Senses came out. It's out.
It's out now. Okay. So I have a question for you, and we can totally do another podcast in the future. Do you want to give over one bit of information or wisdom from that book while people are listening now, so they can go check it out on Amazon? And I mean, in the future, if you do want to do a whole podcast on stuff that you've done in some of the works that are to be released in the Life in Five Senses, excuse me, happy to do that as well. So you let me know. But
I love it. Yeah, well, if I
give me one bit from it.
One thing I would say, well, viewer, I'll give you a silly little thing that's just very fun, and then I'll give you like the transcendent point. Okay, so here's something that I thought was really funny, and people were so enchanted by this detail that I almost called the book "Why Ketchup is Magic," because ketchup is magic. Heinz ketchup is magic, and because Heinz ketchup is incredibly popular. If you're an American, huge percentage of Americans have Heinz ketchup in their refrigerator right now, and I will say to you, this is an amazing thing. Go put just like a little drop of Heinz ketchup in your mouth and experience how sophisticated and complex it is. There's a reason that it is the secret ingredient of so many foods where you would not expect it, like American pad thai is ketchup, has tons of ketchup in it. Lots of sauces have ketchup in them. People put it on things because it is magic. Why? Because of the five tastes. Heinz ketchup has all five. That is almost impossible. So it's sweet, it's sour, it's bitter, it's salty, and it's umami. Now, it's very hard to get all five. Now, you can get four, but often it's with something that's like a combination, like it's like a margarita with salt on the rim, or it's a piece of apple pie with cheese on it, but like Heinz ketchup, it's just the Heinz ketchup and it's got all five. And so, but everybody's like, I must go try it. And then they try it and they're like, this is mind blowing. It is so sophisticated and complex, but we just take it for granted. So anyway, I was like, go taste some ketchup. You will love it. And you will understand why it is so popular, because it's so powerful. But the more transcendent point is just the point that I made before. Whatever aim it is that you're trying to achieve in your life, if you're trying to calm down, if you're trying to connect with other people, if you're trying to connect with your past, or maybe you're trying to be more present in the moment, or you're trying to boost your creativity, or you're trying to find more serenity, you're trying to just get more work done, we can tap into our five senses for that. And this is very easy for us, because if I said to you, hey, Scott, think about using your sense of hearing to increase your productivity. Like, what might you do to do that? Well, like, you'd probably think of things like, you'd say things like, oh, well, there's this really annoying whirring, like my door has this annoying squeak. Maybe I need to take care of that. Or maybe I really find that I work better like in a busy chatter. So I'm going to start working in a coffee shop instead of like isolated in my house. Or maybe I'm going to talk to my coworkers, like, can we have music playing? Because I find that really helpful. Maybe they find it helpful too, or maybe they don't. So I can't just turn on the music and assume that everybody will like it. So it's like kind of the Swiss Army knife that we have. And there's something energizing about the five senses. It goes through our body. And so this is something that like it can help you achieve your happiness aims, but it also just like is revitalizing. Like smelling, like I'm just like, I love smell. I have another quiz. It's called What's Your Neglected Sense? Again, GretchenRubin.com/quiz. If you're like, well, what's my most neglected sense and what's my most appreciated sense? Like, one of my most appreciated senses is smell, which is, like, I love the sense of smell. And I every single day I do something to like really like bring that into my life, and it makes me so happy. So that's what I would say. Turn to your five senses. They're amazing. And you can optimize. And I think that anything that you're trying to achieve, you can find a way to create your environment where it taps into your five senses. So music, you could have an incense, or I've heard that like cinnamon, the smell of cinnamon can do something with your brain that's a positive, or maybe it's just a nice smelling aroma in the room where you want to study or work. Right. Or the light is shining in your eyes. Yeah. And you want to dim that. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Okay.
Or maybe you're sitting in a dining room chair because you work from home and you haven't wanted to spring for like a comfortable chair. It's like, oh yeah, it's time to deal with that. Yeah, there's a million things that come to mind.
Where can people connect with you? So you dropped your website. I'll make sure that goes in the show notes. Where else can people go connect with you? You have a podcast. All your books are on
Gretchen Rubin. Yep.
Yes. Books are on Amazon or wherever you get your books, I'm assuming. Okay. And
I have a newsletter. I have a weekly newsletter called 5 Things Making Me Happy, where I talk about research and things that I've observed and, 5 things making me happy. And I have like more than 1 million people subscribe to my newsletter, which is free. I'm on all the socials, just at Gretchen Rubin. And I love connecting with people. I feel like the world is my research assistant. So if you have examples or resources or questions or insights or observations, like I love being in connection with people, being in contact with people who are interested in the same things that I'm interested in. Yeah, so I have the podcast, I have the newsletter, I have the books, I have the website, I have the quizzes, I have an app, the Happier app. What else? I've got products if you like journals. I have a lot of things. I love.
Go to your website. Go down the rabbit hole.
GretchenRubin.com. That is the hub for everything. Yes.
I love it. I want to say thank you because I love the work that you're doing. I love self-awareness as a concept. I'm very much a fan of it. I think more people have to be more self-aware because it's just been like a net positive in my life. And before I even met you, like the stuff that you speak about and you teach on, it resonates in a really, really big way for me, definitely, because I've always been focused on how do I understand myself so I can best figure out how to navigate this world and navigate my relationships and navigate my work and navigate everything. And if you're blind to yourself and you're just on autopilot, life's going to be tough, but it doesn't really have to be because you start to understand how you tick. So I want to say thank you. That's really, really good work.
Thank you. I so enjoyed the conversation.
It was a lot of fun. I have one last question that's very important. We always close out with this. You've had a great career. My goodness, you've written a lot of books. Good for you. You have written so many books and you keep cranking them out and they keep becoming bestsellers.
And I have books that have never been published too.
I have no doubt.
Yeah.
I have no doubt.
I got 3 novels in a desk drawer. I've got this weird little book called My Color Pilgrimage. I got all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
When you look back, what would be the one lesson out of all the lessons you've learned that you try to tell your younger self?
Be Gretchen. That's my number one personal commandment. Be Gretchen. And that means accept myself and also expect more from myself. And that's not always easy to discern that line, but that's what I would say.